In 1995, a beer-bellied brawler knocked his opponent so unconscious, the man started convulsing right there in the octagon. The fighter responsible? He just stood there, laughing. This wasn't your typical martial artist. This was Tank Abbott, and he was about to become the UFC's most feared street fighter. Big, bearded, and brutal. Tank Abbott was terrifying in the early days of the UFC. He wasn't here to bow, to respect martial arts philosophy, or to follow any rules. Tank had one simple game plan. Walk in, swing hard, watch them drop. And believe it or not, it worked. For a time, he was one of the scariest men in the UFC. Why? Because you couldn't predict him, not even know what he was going to do next. Early life, built different. Tank Abbott didn't grow up like the fighters you see today. He didn't master ancient martial arts. He survived rough neighborhoods the old-fashioned way, by fighting. That's what made him so dangerous. Tank wasn't in it for glory, belts, or fame. He fought because it was part of him, like breathing. He was the ultimate anti-hero of MMA, bringing the brutal spirit of the streets into the cage. And for a while, nobody could match his raw aggression. To really understand Tank's menace, you've got to go back to Huntington Beach, California. It sounds like a surfer's paradise, right? Well, in the 80s, it had a darker edge, a place where street brawls were as common as bonfires. And right in the middle of it, a young David Tank Abbott, fighting for respect, one punch at a time. While other kids were taking karate or playing Little League, Tank was learning the only rule that mattered. Hit first, hit hard, stay standing. First fights in the road to the UFC. After college wrestling, Tank didn't settle into a 9-to-5. He dove straight into underground fighting. Bars, basements, parking lots. You name it, Tank threw down there. No gloves, no refs, no rules. Just fists and survival. And Tank was a natural. He didn't care about jabs, combos, or footwork. He walked through punches like an armored vehicle, throwing his own like cannonballs. It didn't take long for word to spread. They called him Tank for a reason, because once he started moving forward, you weren't stopping him. When the UFC came calling, Tank was already a legend. And while the UFC wasn't sure what to make of him, they quickly learned. This was exactly the kind of chaos the early MMA world craved. Tank's explosive UFC debut. In 1995, Tank Abbott stormed onto the UFC scene, making his debut against John Matua, a massive, highly skilled Hawaiian fighter with serious credentials. But Tank wasn't impressed. He came out swinging like a man possessed, throwing wild, thunderous punches with no hesitation. Within seconds, Matua was unconscious, lying flat and convulsing on the mat. The arena? It absolutely exploded. This wasn't technical. It wasn't polished. It was raw, unfiltered violence. The kind of chaos fans didn't even realize they were craving until Tank delivered it. Tank's debut wasn't just a win. It was a statement, loud and clear. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to hurt people. There was no feeling out process, no respect for technique or strategy, just pure aggression unleashed. Overnight, Tank Abbott became a sensation, not because he fit the mold of a polished martial artist, but because he smashed that mold to pieces. He brought the reckless energy of a barroom brawl straight into the octagon, and fans, they couldn't get enough of it. UFC 6 tournament, the rise of a star. Tank Abbott wasn't about to slow down after his explosive debut. Later that same year, he entered the UFC 6 tournament, a brutal test where fighters had to win multiple matches in a single night to claim victory. No problem for a guy who was used to brawling all night in parking lots, right? First up, Paul Verhoeven's, a towering 6 feet 8 inches monster straight out of the pit fighting scene. But Tank, He didn't care about height, reach, or reputation. He charged in like a wrecking ball, swinging haymakers with zero hesitation and eventually taking the big man down. Every fight Tank fought felt like a violent storm, wild, unpredictable, and unforgettable. He wasn't thinking about conserving stamina or playing it safe. Every punch he threw was a full commitment to ending the night right then and there. And the fans, they were hooked. Tank Abbott didn't become the guy to watch because he was the most technical or refined fighter. He became a star because he was the wildest, the rawest, and the most unapologetically chaotic force in the UFC. Tank Abbott's persona. Love him or hate him. Tank wasn't just a fighter. He was a character. A beer-chugging, trash-talking, crowd-taunting wrecking machine. He'd drink during interviews, mock his opponents, taunt fans like it was pro wrestling. To some, he was a refreshing blast of authenticity, someone who didn't take the sport too seriously. But to others, he was a disgrace, a brawler ruining MMA's credibility. The media didn't know what to do with him. He made headlines. He drew attention. But he also made the sport look more like a bar fight than a martial arts competition. Tank didn't care either way. Love him or hate him, you were going to watch him. And outside the cage, it was the same. Stories circulated of Tank getting into bar fights, street fights, any kind of fight. For Tank Abbott, there was no line between the cage and real life. The UFC evolves, and Tank struggles, but time, as it always does, catches up with everyone, even Tank Abbott. As the UFC evolved, fighters no longer relied on pure grit. They came armed with full training camps, polished strategies, and serious cardio. Tank? He kept swinging like it was still 1995, raw, wild, and fearless. But little by little, the new generation started exposing the cracks. He gassed out faster. He got submitted by more technical opponents. He got completely outclassed by smarter, faster fighters. Legends like Vitor Belfort and Maurice Smith showed that in this new era, toughness alone wasn't enough. You had to be smart, technical, and ruthlessly prepared. Tank's bulldozer approach just couldn't compete with the precision machines the sport was producing. Still, Tank never quit. He kept stepping back into the cage, swinging with that same reckless abandon, even as the sport he helped build left him behind. Tank Abbott's transition to entertainment. As the losses piled up and his MMA career began to fade, Tank Abbott found a new stage for his wild, unpredictable energy: professional wrestling. In the early 2000s, he jumped into WCW, bringing that same beer-soaked street fighter attitude with him. And the fans? They absolutely loved it. He wasn't about technical skill or perfect moves. He was pure Tank, a walking, brawling force of chaos in an already chaotic world. His presence lit up arenas, and it didn't take long for him to leave a mark. He even appeared in NWA Wildside, teaming up with Kevin Northcutt in a wild tag team clash against Bob Sapp and Stone Mountain. Even though Tank lost, it didn't matter. His larger-than-life personality was the real attraction. Deep down, Tank Abbott was always a performer, and professional wrestling gave him a home where he could unleash every ounce of his raw, unapologetic spirit. One last fight. But Tank Abbott wasn't quite done with real fighting. On August 15, 2008, after years of brutal wars and heavy losses, he laced up the gloves one more time for a final showdown. By then, MMA had evolved into a polished, tactical sport, leaving Tank's raw, brawling style in the past. But Tank didn't care about evolution. He cared about fighting. He walked into that cage with the same fearless swagger he had in 1995. Even though the odds were stacked against him, he did what he always did. Throw down without hesitation. Because at the end of the day, Tank Abbott wasn't built for quiet retirements or corporate commentary desks. He was built for battle. Pure, violent, unforgettable battle. Tank Abbott wasn't the greatest technician. He wasn't the most disciplined athlete. But what he was something rarer. A fighter who embodied pure, unfiltered chaos. In a sport trying to become polished and professional, Tank reminded everyone what fighting looked like in its rawest, most primal form. He didn't follow the rules, he made his own. Every fight was a spectacle, a wild, unpredictable force that left fans breathless. Love him or hate him, Tank Abbott wasn't a fighter you'd ever forget. He was a legend of the chaos that made the UFC unforgettable. Sometimes the wildest fighters leave the deepest marks. And Tank Abbott? He left one hell of a scar on MMA history. If you enjoyed this look into Tank's unforgettable legacy, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more legendary stories from the world of MMA. Drop a comment below and let us know. What's your favorite Tank Abbott moment?